Well, we got you through pregnancy, and now you've given birth, and the work now really begins because you are going to have to take care of this individual for the rest of your life. Congratulations. Anyway, what we're going to go through today is starting with infancy. We're going to go through nutrition and growth all the way up through adolescence, and then we'll finish off next time with adults, older adults, that kind of thing. But so we'll talk a lot about how things change rapidly as they grow, and things go up and down as far as their nutritional needs, as far as their eating habits and different things like that. So let's go. But first, I know again you've been clamoring to do this for the last time. So let's look at frame 21. And what do you think that is? I'll give you just a couple seconds. So again, it's a combination of milk, and the water is free. Of course, I understand you guys don't go that direction very much, but it's milk and free water. Milk and free water. Okay, 22. So you're looking at the floor, and it's someplace you may have gone this summer, and there's a bunch of ends on the floor, so it's florins. Okay. 23, and you should focus on the tent there, and it says U.S. government, and some of you may have done this over the summer, and it is government camp. Okay. 24, so we have two bars, and it's pointing at this one down here. And so that would be Barlow. Okay. And then 29. This doesn't look, it's like a potato, only it's not a potato. It's something you might have at Thanksgiving. And it's on top of this thing right here, and that would be then Yam Hill. It's a yam. Okay. And then this is something you turn to drill a hole in something. Some of you may not have ever seen one of those because you've only lived since power drills, but it's something you turn like this, and it drills a hole. And this may be a tough one. Number 30, it is boring. Okay, so we're drilling into there. Okay, the next one is, and you should focus on this, it's something that shoots something. And this would be water, and so that would be Cannon Beach. And 32, if you don't get this one, then you should move, because it's something, a meat product inside of a can, and so it is Gresham inside. Oh, okay. Alright. Well, you can share these with your loved ones and show them what you learned in college today. Anyway. Nutrition in infancy. Well, after birth, growth is very rapid. As you can see from the PowerPoint, you double weight in 6 months, triple birth weight in 1 year. So these little kids, in comparison to their weight, are going to really be snarfing down the food. And So we're going to have rapid cell growth and development, but also the key is going to be brain development. And the first 6 months are very critical to get not only food quantity but quality of food. It's very, very important. A lot of things are happening in that first 6 months. If you look at the weight patterns here, you can see if we start down here how it really accelerates in that first 6 months or so, and then starts to level off a little bit. And so it's these times are pretty critical right in here to make sure you get enough food and the quality of food. If you look at these stages, and these would be months, so 1 month up to 7 months, you can see all of the things that are happening in that first 6 months. All the things that are brain issues, very, very critical that we get adequate nutrition. So again, not only was it important for brain development during pregnancy, but that first 6 months is going to be critical. Actually, the first 2 years, brain continues to develop until you're about 2 years old. And so after that, there is no catch-up growth like there is body growth. So the first 2 years are actually very, very critical for brain development. But that first 6 months is going to be, where you're really getting cognitive things happening, and speech and that kind of thing developing. So very, very critical to have adequate nutrition during those times. And they can be subjected to music. So just make sure it's 70s music, not the stuff. Please don't expose them to rap music at this point in their life. It looks like that's what this kid is listening to. So anyway, obviously, being a dietitian, I would be very much pro nursing. Human milk is very critical. It's the ideal food. It's made for the baby, and I'm going to go through and explain why it is critical for the baby. If you look at the pros of human milk, cow's milk should not be given to the baby for the first year. It is just, and I'll show you that in a second, but it's too high in protein. It doesn't have all the things that the baby needs in the adequate amount. Again, there's a difference between humans and cows. Cows are made to get up and walk on their feet immediately. So the cow's milk, as we'll see, is very dedicated towards body growth and not brain growth. Human milk is very dedicated to brain development in the first 6 months to a year. And then what we'll find out is that formula tries to meet the best of cows and human milk. Formula, can't do everything that human milk does, but it can get as close as it can to human milk, but then I look at cow's milk because, the kids aren't buying the formula. Who's buying the formula? It's the parents. And who is the best advertiser for formulas? It's the parents. And what is the best indication that something is working well? Growth, body growth. If parents see their kids are outgrowing another kid, they think they're giving adequate nutrition and they're getting the best nutrition. Yes, your baby will grow faster using formula. Is it the best for brain development? No, it is not. I understand there are situations where some women cannot nurse. They just don't develop enough milk to nurse, and so formula would then be the best option as opposed to cow's milk. But if you do have the option, there's no doubt in anybody's mind. You can read whatever studies that you want to. There has never ever been a study that said human milk was not the best for the baby. Is it the most convenient? No. Is it the best nutritionally? Yes. Is it best for their immune system? Yes. Is it best for their brain? Yes. Is it best for, rapid body growth is not the best thing to do for a baby. we are growing too big. We've been showing there's lots of issues with, too rapid of growth also. Again, human milk is the ideal food for the baby, and it should be the first food for the baby if you want your kid, to get the best start. As we go through, we'll see the pros of human milk are the lactose level, and you'll notice that there's high polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fats. That's what we've been kind of preaching all along in this class, it's always amazed me that, if you remember, we said vitamin E and vitamin C are antioxidants. And it's always amazed me that human milk has high poly and monounsaturates, which means they have a lot of double bonds that could be oxidated. And yet, to protect that, is my impression, we have lots of antioxidants that are going to protect these from becoming oxidized. That's my impression anyway. And then something that formula cannot offer is immunoglobulins. When babies are first born, they don't have their immune system yet. They've never been exposed to anything. They get their first exposure going through the vagina during birth. They get their first exposure to bacteria and stuff, and that, or when they take their first breath, they get exposed to bacteria being breathed in. And so they have never had to develop an immune system. So for the first few months of before they can get established, they need some protection, and that's in the human milk. And so IgGs, IgAs, and some of the immunoglobulins you may learn about when you get to A&P, or if you've had A&P already, you've learned about them, are going to be, especially in the colostrum, the first milk that's delivered, is a little bit thicker, but it's very high in immunoglobulins and stuff, and then all the way through nursing. And then there's a bifidus factor. We talked about bifidobacterium when we were talking about probiotics and prebiotics and that kind of stuff. Mother's milk has a bifidus factor that is going to encourage the growth of bifidobacteria. And again, if you look on your yogurt container, you will see bifidobacteria as one of the components of live cultures. And so basically 99% of a nursing infant's intestinal tract is going to be bifidobacteria, which has a protective effect. Basically what it does is it lowers the pH from about a 5.9 to a 5.1, which discourages the growth of putrefactive bacteria. Some of you that have had children or been around children that have been nursed versus on formula, a lot of difference between their waste products, as far as smell, as far as texture, as far as appearance, all of those. And the reason is because their intestinal flora are a lot different if they're nursed versus if they are fed solid foods, or for fed formulas, they get a lot of putrefactive bacteria that are really stinky, kind of thing. And but bifidus bacteria, is made to protect the baby from gastrointestinal infections and gastrointestinal issues. So again, another reason why that would be the best first food for the baby. And there have been some issues where, in other countries, where they think that, in America we know basically everything about whatever. They are learning quickly, though we don't. But anyway, there have been some cases where they have stopped nursing and have started feeding powdered formulas to their babies. Well, and two things wrong with that is, number one, or a lot of things. Number one, they're not sanitary, so they get a lot of infections from unsanitary conditions. Number two is they try to stretch the formula, so they dilute it in half. As long as it looks white, they're satisfied, so they don't get adequate nutrition that way. And number three, they don't get protection, and so there's a lot of gastrointestinal issues with formula in countries, or in places, maybe in this country, where they're not real sanitary, and they think formula is better than human milk, and it's not. So I'd encourage you. The other thing about Sometimes babies cry because they're thirsty, not because they're hungry. And so the first, when you get past the colostrum, the first milk, part of mother's milk is very diluted, and so it will quench thirst, and so that's why it gets a little frustrating, I know, for mothers, but sometimes they won't eat as long or as you think they should, and really they're not hungry, they're thirsty, and so they've quenched their thirst. And so you don't get this with formula, because formula is all one consistency. So sometimes they will overfeed because you give them a bottle because they're crying, you think they're hungry, and they're really thirsty, but the only thing they have is the liquid formula, so they're actually getting more calories quenching thirst than they actually need. So that's another reason. The renal solute load basically deals with how much solute is in there that could possibly encourage osmosis and diarrhea. So if you get above the renal solute load, you can get a lot of gastrointestinal problems and some issues with that. And so human milk is just the exact formula for solute load that is what the baby needs. Now formula tries to match that, and they've done their research and they know where the solute load is. So again, formula tries to get the kid growing fast because parents will be happy. They'll advertise that to their friends and they'll buy more. But they also deal with the renal solute load and all that kind of stuff. One of the advantages of formula is, if you remember, we said that during pregnancy, if mothers don't get enough iron, the baby can't store it in their liver. So that's one positive thing, I guess, about formula, is they do have an iron supplement put in there just in case, whereas human milk does not. So if you're nursing, your physician may recommend giving drops of iron because there's not a lot of iron in human milk. And then renal solute load. The cons of human milk, again, there's no iron, but any drugs that get into the blood will get into the milk. It doesn't matter if you're on antibiotics, it doesn't matter if you're on aspirin or caffeine, or any of those things will get into the milk. When I was doing my graduate research, which I did on looking at what my research was looking at 4 drugs, antibiotics, that knowing that the child's immune system was not developed yet, if the mother was on antibiotics, that kind of thing, then I had an article that basically how much, if she took a certain amount, how much would be in the milk. And then the goal was, well, knowing that the bifidobacteria are going to be the intestines, and the antibiotics would not be broken down by the body, then they would get to the bifidobacteria and kill the bifidobacteria, which would reduce the protection of the baby from that. And so anyway, but one of the articles I read while I was doing that research was about a mother who drank a liter of wine, and basically the alcohol got into her milk and basically made her baby drunk, kind of a thing. So anything that you get into the bloodstream will get into the milk. So again, caffeine, if you drink coffee and you breastfeed your kid, they're going to be subjected to the caffeine and they're going to stay awake. So if you drink coffee, don't drink coffee, it would be the situation, or anything that could harm the baby. And then again, the time commitment, you have to be there, even though you can pump your breast and you can actually freeze it and you can store it, it's just fine. And you can bottle feed your baby by pumping the breast and then getting the milk and feeding it that way. The cons of cow's milk is there's no iron, they're very high protein, the renal solute load is really high, and then formula, increased calories, decreased immunity, that kind of thing. So let's look at some numbers just to verify what I've been talking about. What we talked about was cow's milk was meant for body growth. So you can see how much casein is there. Casein is a protein in milk. So it's meant to give the little calf a bunch of protein to grow. And if you look at all the nutrients, you can see vitamin D, again, bone growth. You can look at the calcium, very high compared to human milk, and magnesium. All those things are involved with body growth. Okay, so they're very, very high. If you look at human milk, you can see the lactose is high. Lactose has been shown to change into galactosides, and that is very important for brain development. So you can see it's a lot higher in human milk than cow's milk. You can also see where the polyunsaturated, monounsaturates, and the key with the saturated fats is that they are going to be short and medium chain for easy digestion. You remember the digestion section where we said that these are broken down very early in the stomach, and then they don't need bile and that kind of thing. They can go right through the intestinal without the mycelial and all that kind of thing. So the saturated fats are not like cow's milk. Cow's milk is very long chain. Remember we said they're the worst, 14 to 16 carbons. But the saturated fat in human milk is going to be a short and medium chain, which are just what you'd want. Okay. And then again, I'm always amazed at how much different the vitamin E and vitamin C is as far as antioxidants are concerned. You can see the iron levels are pretty low, and so that's why they need the renal stores, or the liver stores, and then possibly supplementation. But again, you can look on the other side and compare the formula to cow's milk and to human milk and see that they've tried to manipulate and get the best of both worlds. But formula can't deal with the immune system, and doesn't deal with thirst, that kind of thing. So again, human milk's the best, but you do what you think is best for your child. And again, the renal solute load, you can see down below, is pretty high for cow's milk and just right for humans. When should you feed solid foods? 6 to 8 months. The recommendation is, again, dealing with allergies and things like that, then the first foods are normally like rice, something that's never been shown to have an allergy. But you want iron fortified just in case. But 6 to 8 months is the goal now. Some you might hear 4 months, but if you can do it for 6 to 8 months, you're doing your kid a big favor. So I would encourage that. But then when you do solid foods, then you'd want something very bland, because please, I would encourage you not to add sugar to their cereals. Don't add salt. They don't know what it is unless they've been introduced to that by grandma, or you wanted them to be quiet, so you put sugar or something on their little binky, so they would. If you haven't done that, then they don't know what sugar is. They don't know what salt is, and a lot of times parents will taste the cereal and say, "Ooh, well, you know salt, you know sugar." They don't. It doesn't make any difference to them yet. They will get introduced to sugar and salt enough. So please just go with the regular iron fortified cereals with rice, and then if you want to, as you progress, you might add wheat and just make sure there's no allergy there for gluten or anything like that, and just kind of gradually add something. Don't mix them, add them separately just to make sure. Then you'd want to add vegetables. A lot of parents will add bananas before they do vegetables. I mean, come on, if you think about it practically, if you were a kid and you eat your cereals, and then you go into fruits and veg, and you get fed bananas, and then all of a sudden here's some blended peas. Well, I'm sorry, I wouldn't even like the blended peas if I'd had bananas first. So recommendation is to do peas and carrots and things like that, and maybe not corn, because again there's some possible allergies there with corn. And things. So, and then blend them up. It's best to blend them at home if you can get a little grinder and do them at home. Just cook them separately without salt and that kind of thing, and do that. You have to be careful with buying baby foods in the jars and stuff, because if you look at the ingredients, a lot of times you're not getting, all of that is not pure vegetables. What they will do is they will add water plus the vegetables, and then something that is going to make a thickener. And so you may see starch, or you may see guar gum or something like that as one of the ingredients. So you're buying a lot of water compared to the amount of vegetables. So if you do it at home, you're eliminating the water, and you're paying less, and you're getting more for your money. Anyway, so vegetables first would be the recommendation. Then fruits. Be careful with acidic fruits like peaches or apricots. Again, you want to start with bananas, possibly pears, because they don't really have the buffering system yet fully developed. So peaches can sometimes go through and become very acidic, and so be very careful with that. Plus, again, be very careful if you're buying foods that have added sugar, because again, the formula makers of the baby food want the kid to like it, so they're going to add sugar, guaranteed. And they're going to want the parents to like, because sometimes parents will taste it and see what it tastes like first. And if they add sugar, the parents go, "Oh, that's good," and the kids are going to say, "Oh, that's good." They don't need the sugar. Okay, you hopefully haven't introduced them to that yet. But maybe grandma has. But anyway, so be careful. Again, read the label, see how much sugar's on there. You know how to read a label, and make sure you're buying the best quality for your kid. Maybe a little bit more expensive, but again, you can grind your own. Buy a little grinder. You can save a lot of money that way. Buy some little Tupperware things. You can freeze things and then bring them out, thaw them out. There's just lots of little things you can do. And then 9 to 12 months meats, I would suggest milk, not till 12 months. Meats, again, you'd want to start with, if you're going to feed them meats, and it's nice to say, "Oh, I want my kid to be a vegetarian," but man, make sure you get enough protein. Okay, they're going to need it. They're going to need that protein. So just make sure you know what you're doing if you're going to go vegan on them. All right. Ask a lot of questions. Go to people who know, and do it right. Don't try to do it on your own. And then milk, if you're going to introduce it at 12 months, and it needs to be whole milk. They need the calories. This is not the time for skim milk. Okay, that comes at maybe 2 years old. They need the calories now, and they need the saturated fats. They need those things because they're growing very fast. So meats would be mild meats, again, like chicken. Something you wouldn't. Beef is going to be really strong to them, so I wouldn't recommend that for a while. Just go from there and play it. And again, just introduce things into. Don't make casseroles or anything like that, because if there is an allergy to something, then you won't know what it is. Okay, so do everything individually for a while and make sure there's no allergies in that. So what are the recommendations? Again, 700 calories per day is quite a bit for their size and their activity and that kind of. The protein is pretty good for for their size, and so it's quite a bit. Normal is 1.8 for an adult, so it depends. 40% of diet, again, they need the calories. They're growing really fast, and make sure we get enough iron for that. When they hit preschool age is when they really start really not eating as much, and so that's when parents sometimes get concerned, because they'll play with their food, they won't finish their food. This is a tough time because, again, we talked earlier about how you can give an impression to the kid subconsciously. The clean plate club issue, you can't have dessert until you finish your plate, or and that kind of thing. So you have to be careful. Watch serving sizes. What you see on the plate, is probably too much for their age, because they are not growing very fast in this day and age. You need, activity is critical, but a lot of kids just sit in front of the computer or do video games or something. They're not real active. They don't need huge serving sizes. So watch your serving sizes and be very careful with those. But they are going to be very picky because they're not growing as fast. They're not going to eat like they used to. So just keep that in mind. They won't starve themselves as long as you have nutrition foods handy, and finger foods are a good thing. If you can have finger food carrots that are pre-prepared, if you can have things already cut up, all they have to do is take them. They will eat those when they get hungry. And so, anyway, again, preschool growth is slow. There's a concern with iron deficiency anemia, with dental caries, because this is where they're going to be introduced to candy. They're going to be starting to go to birthday parties and that kind of thing, and it's hard to keep them away from sugar unless you have a real, group of people who have these same ideas. Irregular eating patterns, snacking. So snacking is a key. You have to make sure you have good nutritional snacks, finger foods that are prepared, ready in the fridge or wherever, so I can pick them out. And at this time, they really don't like vegetables. They don't like anything green. Sometimes, like broccoli, is very, very strong. They have a lot of taste buds that are going to taste broccoli as being very strong. So you might want to try to hide it. Like, for example, if you have spaghetti or something, it's not too hard to blend up some broccoli and include it into the spaghetti sauce, just a little bit. I mean, not enough to change it. You have to just work with it, but you can blend things up and make it a puree and add it to the spaghetti sauce if they won't eat vegetables. So there are ways to do it. You just have to get a little bit creative when you're doing that. And you can see where their growth, in the first year, you can see growth is really rapid. Then it starts tapering off. And so they won't be as hungry. And especially if they're not active, you can't expect them to eat very much. And don't force them to eat. Be very careful with the Clean Plate Club issue and with dessert and that kind of thing. It's a tough time for parents to weigh whether the kid is saying, "Oh, I'm not hungry. Do you want dessert?" "Yeah, I have dessert." You have to weigh those things and basically, reduce their serving sizes and let them push their plate away. But you have to figure out a way how you're going to work that dessert in, kind of a thing. So tough time, actually. School age, again, this is where really and honestly you start losing control, because they are going to be at other people's houses. They are going to start, maybe not at the age you're seeing on the screen, because that looks like kindergarten, but there are going to be a lot of birthday parties. There are going to be a lot of parties. They're going to have sleepovers, possibly, that kind of thing, where you are not in control. They are going to want to, play soccer, and then they'll have to go out for pizza after soccer and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to monitor how much they're doing that and be very careful. And so if you can have nutritional things at home, then, they going out and, once a week or whatever and doing what other people do is not going to be critical. But as long as you have good nutrition at home. I remember my kids always, we made their lunch and they took it to school, and they always were upset because they never got white bread. And so they're, "Why don't we get white? Everybody else has white bread, blah, blah, blah." And so we always had whole wheat, obviously. But anyway, they're more nutrition conscious now than they were they would be. But it's kind of tough for a parent. Sometimes you just have to do the best you can. So again, the school age, they're going to be slow until they hit their growth spurt. And their nutritional concerns are obesity. Type 2 diabetes is starting to increase because of obesity. Dental caries, again, because they're going to start getting a lot of sweets, so make sure they brush their teeth a lot, and help them to understand how important that is. And I think once they go to the dentist once, I think maybe that will help them, but still, it's hard to resist sweets. It's very hard. And they're going to be exposed to a lot of it at school, at other people's houses, after soccer or volleyball or whatever, and all the kids go out for whatever. It's going to be very difficult. So, but do the best you can, and that's again why they recommend, with osteoporosis, that we should start teaching our kid at age 4 about osteoporosis. And you probably said, well, again, that's when you're in control. At this age, you're starting to become out of control because they're not at home as much as they used to. You don't have complete control. And again, you can see where the weight gain, as they're going through from 2 to 5, the weight gain is very slow, kind of a thing. But then during girls hit their spurt earlier than boys, and they start gaining weight. So this is when they'll hit their growth spurt. This is when they will start getting hungry. This is when they'll start, eating you out of house and home. You'll buy groceries on a Saturday, and by Monday you won't have anything because they have just snarfed it all down. Plus, when they bring their friends over, they all snarf everything, and so you have to go grocery shopping on Monday night. That's just going to happen. So this is where they're going to hit their peak, and they're going to start eating a lot because they get their second growth spurt during those times. So that's the adolescent age, and at the adolescent age, really you do not have control over what your kids eat. If you have done your best to teach them about nutrition and that, then the hope you will have is that they will remember that and not eat as much. But it's very, very hard to do that. And so especially this is when girls are going to start drinking diet pop because they want to lose weight, and they're not going to drink dairy products, or they're not going to get enough calcium. And when they're most rapid growing time, their bones possibly could be thin, and they're not most students, unless they're an athlete, don't get enough weight-bearing exercise. Lots of things happening. Hormones are raging. All kinds of things are happening during this time. So rapid cell growth, sexual development, a lot of hormones raging around. They're making some interesting decisions. Obesity is still a concern, but basically distorted attitudes. So obesity is concerned, but distorted attitudes. This is where anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa are going to come into play, possibly. No weight-bearing exercise, lack of exercise, just lots of different things. So as much as you can encourage before this time, exercise, activities, having them play outside instead of sitting in doing video games or playing on the computer, that might be nice as a babysitter, but it's not going to do them well in their lifetime. So get them as active as possible. But again, for parents, that means you have to be active because you have to take them somewhere and do something, and sometimes that is an issue. But do your best and try to teach them before they get to this age, because these are problems, and if they get these problems, they are going to be problems for the rest of their life. Okay. So here you can see, kind of a growth chart where you can see that general growth is going to be pretty slow up to age 10, and then especially in girls they start hitting their growth spurt and hitting puberty, and in boys it'll get a little bit later, but they go up. Well, I guess here's the general population, but again, the genitalia, or the hormones being produced, and growth slows down, but then it starts speeding up here. Lymphoid tissue just basically deals with their immune system and what's being developed and that kind of thing. And then brain development, again, we said the first 2 years are very critical, but it still goes on, they're saying here, until about 5, but my information is age 2 is the point where the cutoff is. and lots of cognitive thing. Now, brain growth, maybe. But I'm not sure I agree with this, because if you look at reality, I'm thinking brain development kind of goes down at about age 12 or 13, and hits its peak of lowness about 15, and then starts going up until maybe they're 25 or 30, where they actually start making rational decisions that aren't based on television or peers or something like that. They actually can have cognitive development enough that they can make their own smart decisions. But that's just me. Okay. So what are the concerns in adolescence? High intakes of saturated. Again, if you look at these high intakes, basically fast food, okay, are going to be a huge issue. And then alcohol. I mean, alcohol has been a problem in adolescence since before our grandmas were, and grandpas were born. It's been an issue forever. It's not any different now than it was then. It's not any worse now than it was then. It's basically the same. What is different are the different kinds of drugs that are available now. But alcohol is a drug, and so it is still an issue. And so anyway, it's going to be a problem that, again, what can you do about it? I don't know. The only thing you can do is teach your children the best you can before they hit adolescent stage. That's all you can do. And then hopefully they will take that and go with it. But they're going to do some goofy things. That's just who they are. Low intakes, calcium, again for women, for girls, calcium and iron. That's, when they start their period, they're going to start losing blood. The iron stores. If they're eating a lot of fast food and things like that, they're not getting enough iron. They're not getting enough calcium, especially if they're drinking diet sodas and they're not getting enough dairy products. Or, if you don't allow dairy products in your home, then, they may not drink soy with calcium supplements or something. So, in this stage, supplements might be a good idea, because they're not going to get enough. But they're not going to get enough phytochemicals because they're not eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. So it's a big issue. So do the best you can, and then low fiber. But these are concerns. And you as a parent need to do the best you can. But I would highly recommend starting very early in their preschool age, teaching them adequate nutrition and activity, how important activity is. Get them outside playing. Do something to get them active so they enjoy activity. Bicycle rides or something, going to the park, that kind of thing. And then making sure that at home they are introduced to good nutrition, and not foods that you want to make them because it makes them happy. And nutritionally they're not sound for someone. Now, they're going to have, when they reach adolescence, they'll be making their own decisions. So if you can help them for those first years, first 10 years, then you're going to help them for a lifetime. Okay? So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And so we will see you next time, and we'll talk about adults.